The Finding Purpose podcast is proudly brought to you by Relive the Moments, founded by visionary entrepreneur John Lim. We live in a world where it's easy to capture memories, but Relive the Moments makes it effortless to re-experience and share them. From NFC-enabled tap coasters and photo frames to interactive video cards, Relive the Moments turns everyday objects into unforgettable tap-to-experience keepsakes. Imagine gifting a wedding guest a coaster that instantly opens your highlight reel, or giving your event sponsors a custom frame that tells your story with just one tap. Whether you're celebrating a milestone, planning a wedding, honoring a legacy, or elevating a brand experience, Relive the Moments is the bridge between the past and present, between memory and connection. It's not just a product, it's an experience. Visit www.relivethemoments.com and use promo code PURPOSE for 25% off your first order. Let's bring your memories to life, one tap at a time.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Finding Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Adam Vora, and I'm so grateful to have you here. This podcast is all about exploring the journeys of incredible individuals, people who have faced adversity, found their purpose, and are now making an impact in their communities. But it's also about my journey. Over the years, I've faced my own obstacles, moments of doubt, and struggles with identity. Through it all, I found my purpose in giving back, creating a space where people can detach from the negative emotions and stigmas they may associate with their own stories, just like I did with mine. Here, we have real conversations about growth, resilience, and transformation. Whether you're searching for direction, striving for personal development, or simply looking for a place to feel seen and understood, this is for you. So if these conversations resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with us on social media. Now let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome back to the Finding Purpose podcast. I'm Adam, and I'm grateful you're here. Whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or watching on the official YouTube channel of the Finding Purpose podcast, thank you for your continued support. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share. It helps us continue to grow this community and amplify purpose-driven voices. Last week's episode with Idara Otu was a true masterclass in multi-dimensional purpose, from Olympic achievement to nonprofit impact, entrepreneurship, and storytelling. If you missed it, I highly recommend going back for that one. Today, we shift gears, but not in mission, because today's guest is someone who lives at the intersection of discipline, leadership, and transformation, just through a different lens. Dan Singer is a team performance coach who uses the Entrepreneurial Operating System to help leadership teams get clear, aligned, and focused. Through vision work, operational structure, and team health, Dan helps organizations become more functional, more cohesive, and more impactful. His work is grounded in real-world experience. Dan spent years in sales, business development, and leadership, most notably helping scale a company from 14 million to 20 million before it was acquired by private equity, all while running on EOS. But what makes Dan's story even more powerful is his service. He's a Marine Corps Reservist, an infantry Marine by trade, and currently serves as a Gunnery Sergeant and Operations Instructor with Marine Corps Tactics and Operations Group. This conversation is about clarity, culture, and what it really takes to lead with purpose, whether in business, on the battlefield, or in your own life. Let's get into it, man. How you doing?
I'm good, bro. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Welcome to the podcast. We talked it was like a few months ago, and we just had like a really, really good conversation. Yeah. And I was like, all right, man, like I got to invite you on, and, let's kind of dive into, where we left off. If you can, just maybe like tell my audience a little bit about your background and, where you grew up and whatnot, and then we'll kind of just jump into all the different facets that we connected on during our call.
Yeah. Grew up in Long Island, South Shore, Sayville. Graduated high school, went to school upstate, wound up graduating from Albany in 2007. kind of started my career up there. Spent 2 years working with Enterprise. Kind of got caught up in that financial crisis, and was at a crossroads trying to figure out what I really wanted to do next. Service was something I always thought about. I was in high school on 9/11, wanted to join the military at that point. My parents were like, listen, this isn't going anywhere. Like, finish college and then see what you want to do. So at that point I was like, I'm doing this, right? I don't want to be 40 years old, wake up and say, fuck, I should have done it. So I went to boot camp, went in on a reserve contract, came home 2010. And that's really where I got my business development sales career started. And 2 years ago, made the transition and started my own business.
Nice. I mean, that's obviously a leap, starting your own business. And I mean, those are like major decisions. When you were making the decision to go into the military, it was inspired by like growing up through 9/11, or was it a pursuit of discipline and organization and just wanting to be a part of something bigger?
Yeah, so there was a couple aspects to it. My desire to go into the military was rooted in kind of wanting to be in my generation's war, right? We were in Afghanistan, Iraq at that time. I didn't want to sit on the sidelines, like wanted to participate and, at least be able to check that box of saying, hey, I put my hand up and, served. The other side of it, though, that was interesting, I was in a fraternity in college.
Which frat?
What's that?
Which fraternity?
Sigma Chi.
Sigma Chi, okay. I went to UMass, so I was trying to see if we had it there. I don't think we did.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a good time, but like I missed the boys. I missed the brotherhood. And when I looked at the Marine Corps, I'm like, that's it, right? It's a fraternity with guns.
Yeah.
So it was right up my alley, and that's what it's been ever since.
Dude, that's so funny. SUNY Albany, right?
Yeah.
It's a good time.
Yeah, it was fun.
And you're in Greek life in SUNY Albany?
Yeah.
That must have been a good time. So you jumped into the military, and so the camaraderie of it, the brotherhood of it. Talk a little bit about that, because I think it's really important that, men have other men to lean on.
Mm-hmm.
And, what were some values that you got from your peers in those, in those groups? I mean, even in the fraternity, being surrounded by like-minded men as well.
Yeah. So the Marine Corps was unbelievably impactful. Like the entire basis of, on the enlisted side, Marine Corps boot camp is eliminating the concept of the individual. From day one, when you go in, even how you refer to yourself is this recruit in third person. It's not I or me. You get caught saying that, and the drill instructor's like, me, I don't give a fuck about you. Like this recruit, right? And the idea of that is they're trying to remove the individuality and make you understand that you are a part of a larger entity that's serving a bigger mission. Even stuff as simple as, you get guys that come in that are in really good shape. They finish something first. Most people would think like you're going to get rewarded for that. It's usually the guy that finishes first and sits there while the other guys are struggling that winds up getting punished. Because no one gives a shit how fast you finished. What did you do for the rest of the team to bring them along? And you're indoctrinated into that culture from the beginning. So what you start to recognize is this whole thing is about the guy to my left and right? Doesn't matter how well I perform. It's how well we perform as a group to accomplish the mission.
Yeah, man. Were you ever Paris Island?
Say again?
Did you ever train at Paris Island?
That's where I went to boot camp.
That's where you went to boot camp? Yeah. Okay. So it's funny because my family is in Beaufort.
Yeah.
So we go there, and then, I have a friend down there who has access to the golf course there.
Yeah.
So I've golfed it like maybe once or twice. I'm terrible at golf. And I think I pissed off a lot of officers.
Yeah.
Because they had to wait.
Too bad.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But it's beautiful, and like I love that area. Like, were you able to like explore off the base a little bit? This is a little off track, but I'm so curious. No?
Not at all.
No, okay.
And it's funny because, you go down there, you're on the island, right? And there's nights you're doing fire watch, and I can remember like being in the squad bay, looking out, seeing the lights, knowing Beaufort's over there. I'm 25 at the time, so like I had, been around and lived a little bit of life, and I knew I'm like, there's real people over there living, having a nice dinner, and I'm in this fucking prison and can't wait to get out of here. But it's like once you leave, like I just wanted to get home. You know, it's the best time you never want to have again.
Yeah, I mean, it's like pledging, except way more intense. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because when I'm there, we'll be like, oh, they're doing drills, and then I don't know how frequently they have the graduations, but
It's every week.
is it every week?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, like I've been there, and like you see the families come in for the graduations and everything, and it's like just a really cool part of that community.
Yeah.
Which I like absolutely love. So you finish, your training there, and how far between like finishing your training did you like start your business? Like what happened like immediately after you were done?
So as soon as I was done with boot camp, went home for 10 days, you get some leave, and then went back down to North Carolina to go to infantry school. That was 8 weeks. And then when that was done, went back to Long Island, checked into the unit that I was assigned to in Garden City.
Okay.
And so when you go in as a reservist, it's the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year.
Yeah.
So now it was kind of like, all right, I got this thing done, right? Like the Marine Corps, quote unquote, career is in place. Now I needed to figure out what I wanted to do on the civilian side. So got into headhunting, doing recruiting, was working in manufacturing industry, wound up going to work for one of my clients after about a year. And that's when I was really in the manufacturing facility. Found that I enjoyed it because I liked sales and business development, but I also liked the idea of the work and the efforts. There was something tangible at the end of that. We were making things. And that's really where I stayed, right? So 2014, worked for a company in Connecticut. They ran on EOS, asked me to be a part of the leadership team, saw the skill set that I had developed from the Marine Corps, grew that business from 14 to 20 million, sold to private equity. I spent about a year with the new ownership before leaving, and then worked for a couple of bigger companies. Got to a global contract manufacturer where I was handling one medical device account that did like 80 million a year in spend with us. And within 6 months, I'm like, this is not where the fuck I belong.
Yeah.
Like I can remember the day I was sitting on a Zoom call being taught how to do pivot tables. And I'm like, this is fucking miserable. Like I'm not a corporate guy. I don't want to do this shit. And that's really where I started going down this road of figuring out how can I start this business. Took about a year to figure out what I wanted to do. I think I went through most of the pathways a lot of people do, like pizza place, no, liquor store, no, and trying to figure out. So by the time like I had kind of gone through those initial phases, my job in the Marine Corps had shifted. I was with McTOG, where what we're doing is going to the battalion staff, the operational planning teams, and really facilitating the Marine Corps planning process, the rapid planning model, and teaching them how to develop a plan. So the way Marine Corps does it, you get a commander's intent that's like, hey, this is what we're looking to achieve. Here's what we know about the enemy. This is the end state. And that commander gives it to the team, and they're like, you guys build the plan. I'm not telling you how to achieve it. You're going to figure that out. So in my role was really that facilitation and coaching. So started reflecting on this. I'm like, I love that component, that aspect of what I'm doing. I loved working for this company that ran on EOS. Why don't I become an implementer? So I made a couple phone calls, figured out what that process was, and it's like, fuck it, let's go.
Explain to my audience, when you say implementer,
Yep.
What that entails.
Yeah, so my clients hire me as their coach. So I'm teaching them the tools and the system of EOS. I'm facilitating full day sessions with them where they're doing the planning, for their 10-year target, 3-year picture, 1-year plan. And then we're breaking that into 90-day, we call them rocks. They run their business 90 days at a time. As they're doing that planning, I'm facilitating that and really coaching them through the process of how to refine that and get better. So I always make the distinction of like coach versus consultant because they're very different. Both have a need in the world. Look at consultant as more like trauma medicine, right? You're bleeding out. Someone's got to come in, identify what the problem is and come up with the solution. That's a consultant. Coach is more of like that post-trauma surgery's done. Now we have a long road of recovery where I'm teaching them how to be self-sufficient. So like I tell my clients day one, like my goal starting today is to work myself out of a job. In 2 to 3 years, you should be able to look at me or I'm going to look at you and say, are you guys ready to fire me? Because I want them to get to a point where EOS is not a thing they're doing. It's just how they run their business. And my job is to get them to a point where they've mastered that enough they no longer need me.
So one of the things that we had on our conversation, and we were talking about how you speak with potential clients, right?
Yep.
and you're able to kind of identify whether you could work with them or not. And there are certain characteristics that stick out at you right away that are immediate red flags where you're like, all right, this might not be the best client for me. And then there's others where you can gravitate to. And a lot of them aren't really just rooted in business, but rooted in who they are as people.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the red flags first.
Yeah.
Because I think, this can really open up to, how it's kind of can be, all encompassing also.
Yeah. So there's 3 things that I look for in a client that have to be there to know that they're going to be successful with the work we're going to do. So it's kind of like the first level, and then the second level I'll talk about is more about, my wants and needs of who I work with. So 3 things I look for. Number 1, I have to know they're growth oriented. So you want more of something from your business. And I say all the time, that doesn't have to be revenue. You could want more of the right people, more control of the business, more of the right system, structure, processes, more free time with your family, more of something that you're not getting today and you're really not sure how to get there. So growth oriented. The second, I need to know that they're coachable, meaning that they are not resistant to change. I actually look for people that embrace it, right? They loathe the status quo. They're constantly seeking out new and better ways to do things because that receptiveness is what's going to allow them to embrace what we're going to do, which is a shift in how they're running their business. And then the third thing is their ability to be vulnerable. So the real needle movers in what I do is not so much in the tactical level tools. It's in the ability to have difficult conversations, right? Teams have to be able to look themselves in the mirror. Like I teach a lot of Jocko stuff in the session room, that concept of extreme ownership. Tell my teams on day 1, I'm like, when you look at this business, all the great things that are going on, like you guys did that, which is fucking awesome. But all of the problems, you created those as well. And you've got to own that. And there's going to be times in this room where you're going to have to look in the mirror and you're going to have to be vulnerable and say, I fucked up. This is on me, right? And you've got to do that with yourself and with each other. And once we can put that really heavy shit on the table, that's where we're going to start making real progress. So if they can check those 3 boxes, I know that they have those qualities. I know the likelihood of success of the work we're going to do is a lot higher. Once that happens, kind of the second level of it, which is more personal to me, and I really embraced this concept when I read 10X is easier than 2X, is the mindset around wants and needs. Whether you're either abundance-minded or scarcity-minded. If you're abundance-minded, you feel there's plenty of opportunity out in the world, right? You don't go after things because you need them. You go after things because you want them. So when I meet with a client, we do an 1.5-hour meeting. And what I'm trying to gauge is this a team that I would go and hang out with on a Saturday with no business involved? Do I want to spend time with them absent of any opportunity to work together? And if the answer is no, I'm not taking them on. And what happens is now all of my clients that I have, I fucking love them. I show up exactly how I am, dressed like this, talking like this, day 1. Like I'm not putting on a show for anybody. You're getting me how I'm going to be in that room. And if we connect, it's going to work great. And if we don't, that's okay. There's other implementers out there. I'll gladly give names, make introductions, because I'm like, life's too short to work with people you don't love.
Yeah, dude, it's so true. I want to go back to the vulnerability component because I think that's really important. I also think when you have the expectation of vulnerability from somebody else, then you also have to have that same comfort with being vulnerable as well. Talk a little bit about that, like the personal vulnerability that it took for you to kind of really become grounded in what you're doing, and what were like some moments of reckonings that you had to face to really be like, all right, like this is actually what I want to do because I'm not finding joy in what I'm currently doing aside from, obviously the corporate work.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because it ties into like, what is your life's purpose? What is it that really drives you? For me, it's really rooted around serving and helping people to kind of navigate challenge and adversity to, get them to realize their full potential. And that's what this work is, right? Like my favorite part about what I do is when I'm 6-9 months into the journey with a client and they've got like the tools pretty much down. Now it becomes like that vulnerability piece. Like what the fuck is really going on? What is the heavy shit that's we're not talking about that we all know has been stuffed in the closet for 3, 4, 5 years, but just hasn't been brought out. And it's, fundamental of leadership, right? You have to exemplify the behaviors that you expect from teams and people that you're working with. I've never had an issue being vulnerable. I don't know where that comes from. I've always been open and transparent about like things that have gone on in my life and challenges. One of my favorite sessions that we do with clients is an annual planning session. It's a 2-day back-to-back session. First day is really high level, more strategic. Second day is more tactical. But the first day, what we're focusing on is team health, trust building. And one of the things we do is a personal histories exercise. Now, me as an implementer, I'm typically not participating in some of these things, but we do in this session. One of those questions that we go through, there's 6 of them, is what's your unique? And then we kind of explain, like, what's the one thing that nobody in this room knows about you? And that's really where we're like kind of getting into that space.
Yeah.
And it's cool
powerful
because
question.
I'll put some stuff out there and like I'll get clients that look at me like, that's how deep we're going. And I'm like, yeah, we're fucking human beings, man. Like, this is not like surface level shit. Like, we need to understand at a really deep level, like, who you are, what experiences have impacted you and shaped who you are. Because once you have that perspective around people you're spending time with, it starts to frame out for you like how they show up, right? How they receive information, how they absorb things, how they react to stuff. And I'm a firm believer, we talked about this on the call, is, true deep relationships are rooted in the sharing of that vulnerability. It's really easy to have surface level conversations, but once you get raw about what the fuck I went through and what you went through and find that common ground of like, we're human beings, right? We have like these things in common. I think it breeds that tribal aspect that we as humans thrive for. When you kind of sit with your own stuff that's happened to you and you don't put it out in the world, it can become isolating. Once you put it out in the world and you realize, like, if I have a team of 6 and everyone's talking about like the trauma that they went through, it's like, shit, I'm not in this alone. Like, this is all of us. We're all in the same boat. You know what I mean? Just doing life together.
What's the one thing that nobody knows about you?
I don't think there's anything that nobody knows.
You set me up for that.
I mean, it depends on if I'm going through that exercise, depends on how well the team knows me, right?
Yeah.
Typically what I'll go with is, kind of my story of, when my parents got divorced when I was 19 and the 4 years that followed. That was, you and I talked about it, but, I'll put it out there. That was, the biggest, I would say, piece of trauma, you want to call it, adversity that I faced in life. So, growing up, had a good, lower middle class life. Thought my parents had a good marriage, really great relationship with my dad. He was my best friend. So after my second year of college, came home and they were like, hey, letting you guys know, like, we're getting divorced. I'm like, the fuck, why? What I didn't know is my dad had a problem with pills and alcohol before I was born, stopped. I never even saw him have a drink, right? So this was like shocking to me. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. But I guess he had, continual relapses, and my mom and my uncles were the one that were kind of, keeping it away from the kids and putting it all back together. My mom had made a career change, became a drug and alcohol counselor, and I think it just became too much. So there was that shock of that, right? My sister was 13, I was 19, kind of went through the summer, went back to college. My mom had moved out. Now my dad and my sister are in the house by themselves. Sister started getting into drinking and smoking weed, and within a year, like, both of them were off the rails, right? Very enabling, toxic relationship, not using together, but kind of both looking the other way of like, I can't call you on your shit because you'll call me on mine, so we're just gonna ignore this. My sister went down a bad road real fast. Within a year or two, was in every rehab in New York State before she finally found her way onto Rikers Island for a couple bids. And then by the time I was 23, my dad had died of an overdose. So it was like, boom, 19 to 23, like, shit hit the fan. That's usually the story like that I'll put out initially with clients, and they're like, oh,
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but like we all have that, not that exact story, but like there's those things in all our lives that, we don't always put out.
Well, it's funny because those things that we have affect every aspect of our life, because it's untreated trauma. And, you know, having gone through something like that, and for me, it's kind of really kind of eye-opening because it gives me a better understanding of how my behavior as an active alcoholic affected the people around me during that period of time. And it spanned like decades, you know? So, you know, that hearing the perspective of, you know, a victim of my, you know, essentially like my sister was a victim, my dad was a victim, my mom was a victim because of my use. And, you know, in those, during the times of use, you're so selfish that you don't understand or care about how it's affecting the people that you most love.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's something that, you know, I've had to come to terms with, you know, but it's funny hearing it from someone like you who was a family member and how it affected you and the trajectory of where you're going to go.
Yeah.
You know, because was it shortly after your dad passed away that you ended up joining the military?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was within a year, you know? And I think, you know, what's really interesting about it too is, you know, if you think about it, it makes no sense. Like this avoidance of talking about stuff like that you see with people is ironic because those are the most significant things, like you said, that shape who you become.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to that exercise of like framing that out, now you get to contextualize like, okay, I see the things that you went through. Now how you are as a person makes more sense to me. I can frame that out and put it into perspective of what drives that, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, like oftentimes, like probably when you sit with people and they're sharing, like, you know, trauma in their life, whether it was, you know, sexual abuse, whether it was a spouse cheating on them, whether it was that, like, okay, like now I understand why you have trust issues.
Yeah.
Now I understand why you're hesitant to make decisions when they should be swift decisions. And it's just human behavior and the ripple effect of these things that people don't face. And, you know, when was your moment when you were like, I need to face my past in order for me to be effective in what I do?
I don't know that I had a, you know, kind of epiphany like that. What I did realize and how I got there, I'm not really sure, but I'm so appreciative. Sometime around, so this happened at, you know, 23 was when my dad passed away. Sometime before my 30s, right? So like 27, 28, somewhere around there. I had the recognition of, and I think going to boot camp really helped, right? Because you go down there, you meet people from all over the place, all kinds of trauma. You're starting to talk to these guys and understand, like, some of these guys had life really fucking bad, right? And having those conversations, it's easier to pull yourself out of this victim mentality of like, you know, the world is out to get me and these things happened to me. It's like, no, they happen to everybody. Some are a lot worse than others, right? So you need to put things in perspective of, you know, I had those first 19 years with my dad that were fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Those are 19 years that I know plenty of guys that never got any of that, right? So I have things that I can celebrate. There's good within there. The other thing that I realized, though, is I was like, holy shit, the worst thing that could have happened to me already happened, right? So everything from here is going to be easy because, like, it can't get worse than it was. And that's a burden that gets alleviated once you recognize that, you know? So that was a major shift for me. It also started to frame out in my head that life's going to show up again, right? I'm going to face adversity at some point in the future. And I've been through this awful shit and wound up coming out okay, which now I've got the confidence of like, I'll be okay the next time something bad happens.
Was any of like the decisions that you made after, you know, everything happened with your sister and your father, was anything, because I'm only asking because I know for a fact with my mom and dad, they very much blame themselves. They either blame themselves, and, you know, I'm pretty confident that with my partner, it was also, how did I not see this? Like, so it was a little bit of guilt, a little bit of like, I got fooled. You know, were any of those kind of motivating factors where you're like, hey, like, I'm going to go to the military, I'm going to, and live exactly opposite of the way they live to protect myself because maybe I am vulnerable maybe I am vulnerable, being that it's in my family.
I don't know. I don't think that like went through my head of like, you're saying like those choices is like shielding me from making those mistakes.
Like, I know that my parents felt a lot of guilt, and they felt a lot. They felt that it was their fault that I turned out the way that I did for as long as I did. And I think in with my partner, it was just like more of like how did I not see this? So I think those are natural reactions to have when someone close to you is operating as a addict or alcoholic in a deceptive manner. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious to see if that was anything like if that like crossed your mind at all at any point.
I don't think so. I kind of looked at it. I mean, with my sister, it was obviously unfortunate because she was young, but I looked at my dad, like, the evolution of it. I'd gotten to a point where the year before my dad died, like I had cut off communication with him. In order for me to be able to do that, I asked myself, like, if I don't pick this phone up again, am I okay knowing that the next time I get a phone call, it's going to be because he died? And am I going to live with any guilt of I could have done more, I should have tried more? And before I made that decision, I needed to make sure that the answer to that question was an unequivocal no. Like, there is nothing more I could have done. And I got to that point. Like, I looked at him like, this is an adult who has seen the consequences of his actions and just doesn't want it enough for himself. I can't want it for him. And I was able to sort of alleviate the potential of that guilt before I made that decision, which, became what I didn't realize an incredibly impactful and profound thing for me, which actually showed up this year. So my marriage ended this year. Found out some stuff in February that was pretty shocking, and went through.
Sorry,
no, it's all good, man. And kind of like
the way you said that was just kind of
as I went through the process of like understanding like what's going on, like trying to repair, putting the work in, for choices that I didn't make myself, I went right back to where I was at 23, 24, 22 with my dad. And I'm like, oh, I've been here before. Like, I know what this is, right? There's a person that I'm sitting across from who I can't want it more than they do. I've got to get to that point of recognition of like, the marriage is going to die. Go through that grieving process and cycle the same way that I did with my dad. Have that reflection period of, if I walk away from this, am I going to wake up one day and say, I could have done more, I should have tried more? And once I was able to answer that question, again, okay, we're going to delineate now, and it's what's next and moving forward. So it's just crazy how like you don't realize how these things are going to show up again in life,
It's so funny that you say that, because I think a lot of the times people hold on to things that aren't serving them for too long because they have the emotional commitment to them, despite how painful it is.
Yeah.
And I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I've lost people in my life, but one of the hardest things for me was essentially going through that mourning process of who I once was, which is, when you're recovering from drugs and alcohol, you're saying goodbye to a whole nother lifestyle.
Yeah.
You're saying goodbye to a crutch that you used to make you feel good when you were sad, to make you feel good when you were angry, to make you feel happier when you were happy. That really was the solution to any emotion. And, letting go of that, you kind of go through the same grieving process. You go through the 7 stages of grief when you're in recovery. You just don't realize it. Like, I bargained. I said, I'll only drink beer, or I'll only drink on the weekends and all that. I had the depression. I had the denial. No, I'm okay. All those 7 stages occur until you obviously get to the point where it's so dark that you need to just accept the fact that this is defeating you. And, I think when you look at anything that is not serving you, but you want it to, or you feel like you can impose your will on it, which a lot of people do, whether it's with a business partner, whether it's with a spouse, whether it's sometimes even with their children who are harming themselves in ways that you can't control. The acknowledgement and the self-awareness of understanding that, hey, like, there's nothing I can do here. It is so hard to do.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like you just talked about a couple ways in your personal life that you've dealt with that. I'm sure there's also times when you see clients doing that and you're like, why are you holding on to this shit? Because it's harming your bottom line.
Mm-hmm. I think the deeper aspect of it is so much of that stuff is so intertwined into your identity, right? Like, you think about like the drug use and alcohol, like what goes along with that? Like, you're the guy at the bar, you're, maybe you got all the bottles on the shelf. Like, that's part of your identity and who you are and defining, you as a person. I think the same thing, with a marriage, right? It was like, that was part of that grieving cycle of, this is part of my identity. Like, I'm a husband and a father. So once you take that away from me, like, now what am I? Mm. And that, I think, is an area that whether someone recognizes it or not, you can get really lost, right? Because by not having an identity, like, you're kind of just up in the air.
Do you think people lean too much into those labels, and in an effort to like be that great father or be that, great spouse, they lose touch with like, hey, I'm Dan, I'm Adam?
I think the bigger problem is people don't actively embark on like the never-ending journey of discovering their true self. It's something that's a concept I've gotten really interested in over the past probably year or two, is how much of who I am and how I think influenced by external factors, and I'm kind of pulling stuff in and trying to construct like what I want to be versus getting in touch with who I really am at the core and living to that. And when you look at some of those other things, I think they become like these compounding factors of, intertwining and creating this identity of like who you think you are, who you want to be, and is not truly aligned with that true self.
Quick break to shout out our sponsor, Relive the Moments. Founded by John Lim, they're redefining how we share memories. From tap-to-play photo frames to interactive coasters, they turn ordinary objects into powerful, shareable experiences. Perfect for weddings, events, or milestone moments. Relive, reconnect, reimagine. Check them out at www.relivethemoments.com. Now back to the show. What are some like practices that you incorporate to keep yourself as aligned with your true self?
So there's a couple books that I've read that have really, like, there's a couple exercises in it that are impactful. So 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. He's got one chapter where it kind of walks through articulating your life's razor, which really you get down into a sentence like, what is the guiding principle in life? And, the timing of it was interesting because I read this book as I was going through, all the stuff with my marriage ending. And what I wound up coming out with was, I'll be the type of man that my kids are proud to call their father, right? Every decision that I had to make over that 6-month period where I wasn't sure what to do, if I gut checked it with that statement, I was like, oh, I know what the fucking answer is, right? Like, what of these 2 choices am I going to make where if I have a beer with my kids at 30 years old, I can tell them the options that were in front of me, what I chose, and they're going to be like, I'm proud of you for picking that. So that was really helpful, like really doing the reflective work. The other thing that I started getting into a couple months ago is Find Your Why by Simon Sinek, and really going through that exercise of defining like, what is my life's purpose, right? Not just work-wise, but as a human, like, what do I want to be aligning myself with in life? And once you have that framed out, figuring out what aligns with this and what doesn't, and whatever doesn't, you get rid of. And it's, I think, not that easy to do for some people because you need to be able to tap into the core of like, who is your true self? Like, what are the things about you that are innate? And it's got to align with that, right? Like, it can't be aspirational type of shit. Like, oh, this is who I want to be, but it's not really who you truly are.
It's funny you say that because I just hit 3 years of sobriety back on August 4th, and I was kind of just taking an inventory of where I was 3 years ago, who I was hanging out with, the places I was frequenting, some of the things that I thought that I enjoyed, and where I am now and who I'm surrounding with, and what are the decisions I'm making, and but more importantly, what am I factoring in when I'm making decisions? Because I think that's really important. And, a lot of the things that I was factoring in previously was, tangible outcomes in regards to material items.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm really making a decision, especially with people who I choose to surround myself with, is, are they going to add value to my life? Are our morals aligned? Can we make each other better?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where I would say the biggest, most drastic change in my life is where I'm having conversations with people where I learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
I can grow with them, and they're rooting for me just as hard as I'm rooting for them.
Yeah.
And when I look at the folks that I was hanging with prior, what a stark contrast.
Oh yeah.
And that's something I'm really proud of, because I am a firm believer that, it's because I'm also attracting that, and the type of people I was attracting back, were, just people who wanted something transactional, party, there was no depth, there was all surface level.
Yep.
And that's one of the things I'm most proud of in regards to the progress that I've made, on this road to recovery. Talk a little bit about that, like the people that you surround you with, and how much of an impact that has in really skyrocketing your growth.
Yeah. So before I do that, one of the things I want to touch on is like what you said, the reflection piece of it, because this is something that I teach my clients. So there's a book called The Gap and the Gain. And it's really more around the mindset of entrepreneurs, where what tends to happen is a lot of them are living in the gap, right? So they're looking at where they're at today, and they're comparing that to where they think they should be. And there's a gap between those 2 points. Now, to an extent, it's good to be forward-looking and want more and continue to strive for growth, right? But if you always live in the gap, you're never fulfilled, because once you get to that next place, now the needle moved, and you're like, well, I should be there now.
Mm.
So what I have them do is be really intentional about, all right, let's take a pause and do exactly what you just talked about. Look where you were a year ago and compare that to where you're at now. Look at how much progress you've made and celebrate the gain, right? Start looking at how much more you've been able to accomplish. You'll get a sense of fulfillment from that, of like, holy shit, I'm a lot different this year than I was last year. I might not be where I want to be yet, but I've made a lot of progress. So that concept, not just in business, but in your personal life, is huge, of being able to do that. Like, I did this at the end of the year last year. I just kind of sat down and I scrolled all the way to January 1st and just started looking through my pictures, right? And I'm like, holy shit, like I got a lot done this year. It didn't feel like it on December 31st, but as I'm looking through it, I'm like, I made a lot of progress, right? It's bringing me back to those moments of, not having clients and going through shit and looking how I got through it. So it's a huge concept that you can apply everywhere. As far as the intentionality around who you're surrounding yourself with, it's big. I have become a lot more cognizant of that. This is why I love the work that I do, is because the 8 hours that I'm spending with my clients, like, as much as I'm helping them, they're helping me, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that'll happen in that room where I'll call them out on shit. And as I'm saying it, I'm like, this is for me too. Like, I got to take this when I leave here and reflect on it. And so starting to look at my personal life is, where are those relationships of reciprocity, where I'm delivering value to them, helping to make them better, calling them out on their shit, and they're doing the same thing to me. Like, we got to be gut checking each other and leveling up. And it's interesting because as you start doing that with yourself, you kind of look at other groups of people and seeing those relationships and interaction, and you're like, yeah, that's surface level bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're just occupying each other's time. There's no depth there. They're not making each other better. And then you start having that conversation with people and start looking for the ones that are seeking the same thing out, and then being a lot more intentional about who you surround yourself with. It's unbelievably impactful.
Well, I think it's also important, what you said about looking back and how to look back, because I think a lot of the times people look back with regret.
Mm-hmm.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda. You can't change that.
Right.
But if you look at it and say, wow, look where I am now, look how I'm thinking now, really, that's really the biggest part. Like, how's my thinking changed from, time A and time B?
Yeah.
And that's the thing I acknowledge the most. And also what I seek out when it comes to the people I surround myself with. Like, I love being around people who are hungry to learn and to grow. Like my boy Justin back there, like he's all he wants to do is like perfect the craft, and he has a great mentor in that, and like that's just like a beautiful thing, like I love when people come to me and they're like, how did you do this? Because that's a huge part of my mission, to be able to give back everything that I've learned and accrued over my period of growth, because it's selfish to not want to give it back, and I think for me, I say this a lot, like, for much of my life, I was a taker. And, these past 3 years, I feel like I can reflect back and be proud of the impact that I've had in other people's lives.
Yeah.
And I love that you're aligned with that, because there's a lot of coaches who just look at X's and O's. There's a lot of coaches who are like, all right, like these are your KPIs, X, Y, and Z. You need to get rid of her. She's not performing. But there's not a lot of coaches who are going to say, hey, let's put everything on the table. Let's actually get a little bit vulnerable and see what's really underneath the decisions you're making. And I think that's why you're really successful in what you do. Let's talk about like mentorship, because I think that's like a big proponent of my growth personally. Who are some mentors that, you leaned on? And I mean, obviously, like, you read a lot, and a lot of, my mentors are authors, or there are folks who are doing what I'm doing. So they may not be direct mentors that I call every day.
Yep.
Who are some mentors who, you feel have made you better, both as a man and as a professional?
Yeah. So I've never had like a distinct mentor. Like, there's always people in my life at any given time that I know I can go to with things depending on where they are. Like, that's the biggest thing at the Marine Corps, is like that culture that exists there. The guys that I work with, always high performers. There's always somebody to go to and kind of talk through things and be able to absorb from. For me, it's more of like a mentor network, where I'm able to kind of bring little pieces of everything. One of the best things about being an implementer is the EOS community. So I've got a group of 7 other implementers that I'm on a call with every Monday. So one of the things our clients do is a level 10 meeting with their leadership every week where they're IDSing issues. I run my EOS practice on EOS, so I'm doing all the same shit that I'm teaching them. So my level 10 is on Monday. All the implementers are veterans, so we've got every branch of the service that's in there. And it is the same level of vulnerability and depth. Like, not only are we talking through and helping each other out with the tactical stuff in the room with clients, but it's also about like what's going on in our personal lives. Those guys, after this stuff started happening with my marriage, like, that was the first group that I went to. I was in Texas with them 3 days after I found this information out, and just sat with them and unloaded everything. And we're just going through it. And everyone's talking about, their marriage troubles, who, went through what. So that, I'd say, for the past 2 years has been a huge, support system for me, of having that guidance and getting it in a context too, where all 7 of them are coaches, right? It's a lot different than just talking with a friend, because they understand the process of asking questions and not telling you what to do, but kind of walking you onto that target and letting you come up with the decision of what you need to do.
Well, I think it's also important to have a group like that because they also hold you accountable and call you out on your bullshit where you're not being honest, or when you're telling them half truths, or you're spinning it to, make yourself look good, which is all something that we do naturally to look good around people who we respect.
Yeah.
And that's something where, like I lean on, I have several like mentor groups where like, whether it's my peers in recovery, whether it's my, peers in podcasting, my peers in, events, but like it's all based on trust, like at the end of the day, having that group of men that you lean on, they also know you well enough. And that's like the most important factor. And they're also comfortable calling you out on your shit, because I need that, I need that, like someone to just be like, Adam, you're full of shit. Like, what was your role?
We all need that. And that was the first thing they did, right? Went to them, I'm like, hey, here's what happened. Here's what I found out. And they're like, look, that's not your fault, right? But all the stuff that happened before that, like you played a fucking part in that.
Yeah.
And you need to go figure that out. Like before you even address this shit, you got to look internally and be like, how was I not showing up the right way? What part did I play in? Take ownership of that and address it. Like, because if you don't do that initially, the rest of the shit's not going to matter. And I was like, fuck, you're right.
Yeah. And it's humbling. And, sometimes you might get a little pissed off at them. And there have been times when people called me on my shit and I was like, fuck you. And I hung up the phone.
Yep.
But then I called them back and I said, you know what? Like I thought about what you said. And
Well,
I had to take a look in the mirror.
And that goes back to like what we were talking about who you intentionally are bringing around, right? That those relationships of reciprocity. I say it all the time. Like, if I love you, I'm going to fucking call you out. Because the easy thing to do is to be like, yeah, you're the victim. Like that's, you're right, poor you, and not address it, right? The hard thing to do is get into that danger area, right? And be like, yo, you got to take a fucking look in the mirror. Like some of this is on you. Because then you're dealing with the potential defensiveness and like you might fracture a relationship and, it's scary to go there. But when you truly love someone and you care about them, you're going to do that. Because that is what's best.
Dude, it's so true. And, we live in a society of enablers, and I was surrounded with enablers for my entire life where it was like, pour me, and then it was pour me a drink. And, like that's it. Like people were like, oh, yeah, like, yeah, it sucks. Like you shouldn't, they did you wrong. And it's like, no, they didn't. I was a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
And, for me, if I don't have that accountability, it can lead down a very dark path.
Yeah.
And so, as much as, I may not like to hear, I need to.
Yeah.
And even if it is that situation of like, yeah, they shouldn't have done that to you and that's horrible and like you were a victim in that circumstance, it's like, but now what? Right? Because you don't have to fucking make yourself, put yourself in a position where you're going to, be detrimental, right? Like I always say, who you are is not a result of what happens to you in life. Who you are is a result of what you do afterwards and how you choose to show up. Bad shit's going to happen to all of us. What are you going to do about it when it's over?
Yeah. It's funny because you're right. Like life is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Life gets lifey. And you know what? Without those, trials and tribulations, then you can't really experience the joy in life either.
100%.
And I think that's like something that, for me, I wasn't able to face those dark moments. And, now having done the work of unpacking them, and I'm talking about like heavy shit that I really never faced, like the loss of my mom, the suicide of a good friend, like all these things, the way I reacted to them, frankly, was quite cowardly.
Yeah.
Now that I, can be 100% honest with myself, rather than actually face it and understand how it affected me and also understand that it didn't happen to me. It was not my fault. These things happened. I had to accept it. I had to grow from it. And I also had to extract some lesson, some blessing, some silver lining from it so that, there was a purpose to, that trauma.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, man. It's so crazy because one of the things I'm very cognizant of now is just because I'm doing the work and just because I choose to live the way that I live now and think the way that I think, I also need to accept the fact that not everyone's living that way.
Yeah.
And that's something that, in the early onset was very challenging because I'm like, this is how everyone should be living. Why aren't you? And, really understanding that everyone's on their own journey. And you can only really pray for them to get to that point where they're like, okay, I'm ready to start my growth journey.
Yeah. It goes back to what we said before, right? You can't want it for them. Like they have to want it, but that's where when you start being intentional about who you surround yourself with, and I'm not saying like you cut those people out, but it's more like, all right, keep it at arm's length. Like I understand what this is. But the ones that I'm bringing close, like we're going in deep with each other. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's okay. And it's almost to your point, like those superficial relationships, the ones who don't want to do the work, it makes you appreciate the ones who are doing the work a lot more.
Yeah, and it's also understanding that, listen, just because they're not doing the work doesn't mean that you can't be a power of example. And, sometimes just not letting them affect the way you move it could potentially be the biggest eye opener for them.
Yeah.
And, I've realized that now when I've had like kind of instances where, like I was like that, where I was pushing people's buttons and wanting a reaction. And, now I'm disciplined enough not to really give people the reaction that they want.
Yep.
And, oftentimes they're surprised and oftentimes they're impressed, frankly, and they'll come back and be like, that was like a good way to handle that. And, my bad, because maybe that's the first step in them being like, I was an asshole. Maybe I need to take a look, so, it's so funny because I remember like we got off our call and we were like, bro, like we're going to have like a deep conversation.
Yeah.
And, like we had just spoken for the first time ever and we just started like, and I was like, it's such a good vibe. And I'm like loving the energy of this conversation too, because it's exactly like, I feel like what my audience needs to hear.
Yeah.
And, I'm super grateful, bro. How does what are 3 daily rituals that you incorporate in order to stay, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, whatever, grounded?
Yeah. So my mornings are always the same. Like I'm up at 5:00. I get to the gym at 6 and like that 45 minutes before I leave the house is the same, like shot of espresso, sit down, quiet, like lights are off, no one's around. I'm not one of the like meditation journaling guys. Like that's just not my thing. But that is like my morning ritual, right? Get into the gym, get a hard workout in, like it changes my mindset for the day. I've gotten to that point where like forcing myself to take a rest day is fucking miserable, but like I do it because I know like it'll let me go harder next week. But that's it. Like that, my mornings are like set for me.
Love that. I usually ask everyone like purpose, obviously.
Yep.
Purpose questions. What does the word purpose mean to you?
Your reason for being. Like that's, and so it's interesting, like the timing of this was so cool because the second session that I do with clients, like what we're doing is filling out their VTO. It's called Vision Traction Organizer. It's 8 questions, really strategic planning. What are your core values? What's your core focus? What's your 10-year target? What's your marketing strategy? What's your 3-year picture, your 1-year plan, your rocks and your issues? And so we're going through this and this becomes like a simplified approach to strategic planning for them. In core focus, there's 2 parts: their purpose, cause, or passion, and their niche. So the purpose, cause, or passion, what we're doing there is really trying to capture the true why behind the business, like the deeper meaning of it, of why they're doing this. And then their niche is what they do better than anyone else. And it really is so powerful because when we articulate that, it cascades through the rest of everything else. If we can quantify in the 10-year target something related to their why, now that becomes emotionally inspiring. And then that carries over into the rest of that plan. And, watching clients that fucking hit it and seeing like what that does for their focus and drive and motivation to grow this business with the emotional connection to it was so impactful. And I started reflecting on, all right, I know what my purpose, cause, and passion and niche is for my EOS business, but like, what is that for my personal life, right? I'm not religious. I've tried to be. I grew up Roman Catholic, and as soon as I made my confirmation, I'm like, yo, I'm done. Like, this shit just does not connect in my brain. After I lost my dad, like, I tried going back and finding it, and I'm too logical, so it kind of undermines like the faith aspect of it. But I'm like, I need something that's like a guiding principle in my life. So this idea of like finding and defining my purpose became really interesting to me, which is how I came across Simon Sinek's book. And, you know, our conversation like really just fast forwarded and accelerated that. And for me, like really where I'm getting to is it's really rooted around helping guide people through their challenges and adversity so they can become the best version of themselves, realize their full potential. And that's a lot of the reason why like I'm so open about sharing, you know, some of the adversity that I've been through is like, I don't want that to go to waste. Like, yeah, it's my shit, but like it can be for the world too, right? If I can put that out there and be like, yo, I went through some fucked up stuff, like, and I'm still good. And here's how I went through it. And you can too, and open that conversation and maybe be that spark that someone's like, you know what? Fuck this. Like, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. Like, I'm just going to take ownership of what happened. And like, I'm going to come out on the other side better than that. Like, that's what really like guides me. That's what I love. When I look at the work that I'm doing with my clients, when I look at the closest relationships that I have in my life, the conversations that mean the most to me with the people around me, that's the common thread through all of it, right? I love being the person that when someone is like not able to mentally navigate a challenge that they're going through, that they're calling me and being like, yo, what do you think? You know?
Yeah, I love that. You know, it's funny because, you know, you were talking about your problems and how they are uniquely yours, and it's your responsibility to share them to hopefully inspire others. One of the things they say in the rooms of recovery is everyone threw their problems into the middle of the room and was asked to, you know, pick somebody else's problems, they're going to go right back after their own.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, that's something where, you know, I've learned that, you know, my problems are uniquely mine, but I'm also uniquely equipped to solve them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's something that's super important. It's also, you know, super important to understand that when we share our problems, you know, 9 out of 10 times, there's going to be someone who went through something harder, but similar, and who has the answers. There's no problem that I'm going through or you're going through or Justin's going through or Claudio's going through that somebody else hasn't already gone through and has solved.
Right.
Not a single problem in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's something that, you know, always, you know, keeps me seeking more, you know, just information and knowledge and growth. Because at the end of the day, you know, my toolbox I feel is stocked pretty well, but there's always more tools that I could throw into there. So I love how you included that into your answer, because like it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
You know, what advice would you give to somebody on that journey of finding purpose?
You got to want it, first off, right? Like, take an inventory of your life. Who are the people you're surrounding yourself with? Who's adding value, right? Like, since I've had this person in my life, has my life gotten better, worse, or the same? Start figuring that out. And that's really difficult. I think a lot of people don't want to do that because they kind of already know the answer to it. Once you're able to kind of eliminate the noise, then I think you can start getting to the point of discovering really who your true self is, right? Stripping away all the bullshit. You're going to wind up with a short list of people where you're adding value to each other's lives, and there's probably some common threads there, rooted in values that you share. Those values are probably going to be reflective of who you truly are. And once you can articulate and define what those values are, now you can start kind of working through, you know, where do I get joy in my life that aligns with these values? What do those things look like? And start framing out what your purpose is. And then once you have that, then you're going to do an inventory of your full life and say, what's aligned with this purpose and what's not. And same thing, scrub that. Keep the things that are aligned and get rid of the ones that aren't.
Yeah, it's so funny because I do think that more often than not, I mean, we know what's good for us and we know what's not. It's just, that emotional attachment and sometimes it's easier said than done to detach emotion from a decision or a fork in the road.
Yeah.
So we all, I think a lot of people struggle with that. I know I still struggle with it sometimes. It's funny because you keep referring to Simon Sinek's book, which is a great book. One book that actually really changed my outlook was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah.
By Mark Manson. I love that book.
Yeah.
And I read it once a year, and because a lot of it for me also when it came to, finding my purpose and living purposefully was not caring about everything. There's certain things that I need to care about and there's certain things I don't. And a lot of the things that I don't care about, just don't deserve that mental capital.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like a way that I try to live where it's I use this term a lot, mental capital. What am I using my mental capital on? What am I worrying about? And more often than not, I'm worrying about something that is never going to play out the way that I want or that I have no power over. And it's wasted mental capital. And I have limited mental capital in a 24-hour period and I need to always use it in a productive manner. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Bro, this is an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
I would love for you to, you can talk to that camera, talk to my audience, tell them where they can reach you, what you have going on next, anything that you'd like to share with my audience. The floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way I always say my Instagram, Dan Singer EOS, that's where you're going to see if, you think, hey, maybe I want to work with this guy. You're going to get a true picture of who I really am. So I send everybody there. I'm not made for everybody. That's okay. Not everyone's made for me. But if you look at that shit and you're like, yeah, this is someone I'd hang out with, then, hit me up. We'll talk.
Dan, appreciate you, man.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Great conversation, my audience. This is one of the best conversations I've had in a while. I want to thank Justin. I want to thank Claudio from Kai Visions. If anybody is looking for any media needs when it comes to creating content for the business, creating content for an event, whether you want to start a podcast, feel free to reach out to me or at Kai Visions directly, and we can make that happen for you. I also want to thank everybody who subscribes, likes, reposts, DMs me. These conversations are meant to help as many people as possible, to expand this community, and to hopefully have a large impact. So thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking to you next time.